Welcome to the Hockey Writers Union Junction, a weekly show from our Columbus Blue Jackets insider, Mark Scheib, bringing you the latest news, rumors, trades, player grades, game results, and much more. From training camp to the playoffs, from draft day to the trade deadline, he covers everything that happens with the Jackets. So get ready. It's time for another get-together at Union Junction.
Hello, hockey fans. Welcome to a special edition of Union Junction. Why is it special, one might ask? It's because even though there's a game on Wednesday night, we normally don't tape. It's the last episode before the NHL's trade deadline, so we're making an exception. You are watching this on March 17th, 2022, so it's Thursday, game night against the Washington Capitals. However, we are recording this prior to the Wednesday game against the Ottawa Senators. So we're not going to make any reference to that because the game hasn't happened yet. But what we are here to do is talk some important business, and we're going to have a little bit of fun with this episode. Nick is back, joining this week, and we are going to just react to your fan trade proposals. So what I did is I went out to Twitter and I asked for fans to give us the one trade that you think that the Blue Jackets will make, give us the terms, who's the other team involved in. We're just going to sit here for the next 25, 30 minutes and we're going to react to it, where we're going to give hopefully some good insight, maybe a few laughs here or there, and hope you enjoy it. Right, Nick?
Yeah, it's I'm pretty excited for it, actually.
But I'm not quite there yet, though. I'm not as excited about that yet. I'm more excited about the Hockey Writers Morning Skate, right? So,
well, you're always fired up about this, Mark.
Well, there's good reason that I'm fired up for this, Nick, and that's because if you sign up for it, you will get some of the best stories out there in hockey delivered to your inbox every morning. So make sure you go out there, click on any of our articles. You'll see a link to it. And then that way you will not miss anything that goes on here at the Hockey Writers.
And even if you don't want to click on one of our articles first, which I mean, you're going to do it after you get the morning skate anyways, right? You can do it on the Hockey Writers homepage. It's right there. Yep. Or just go to morningskate.io.
Oh, that's right.
And all it takes is your email address. Boom.
That's all it takes. And it's free of charge. We will never ask you for a single penny.
No.
And in fact, we might even have a prize for somebody as a result of this. So we're going to go through, we're going to monitor all the trades. Anybody that either nailed a trade or got closest to it, I think I'm going to do maybe a little $10 gift card somewhere, whether it be Starbucks, Tim Hortons, something like that, to be determined. But we're going to have a lot of fun with this. So let's just jump right into it. Got plenty of trade proposals to go over, but I think we're going to see a theme as we go through this. So I'm going to start with Justin Needham, and we'll kind of go from there. There's a lot of stuff to go over. So Justin says, Domi isn't traded at the deadline, and they announce a 2-year extension for $8 million total, a $4 million AAV, giving Domi time to get more consistent. I get why there's the sentiment out there, because if you've been watching the recent games, Max Domi has been one of the best skaters on the team. But what's been maddening is the time leading up to that. So I want to give you the shot at this, Nick. Just Max Domi overall, do you see any way he stays past March 21st?
Oh, I'm not sure. It's definitely tough because if you look back at, the recent history of the Blue Jackets holding on to, unrestricted free agents heading into the deadline, hasn't gone really well for the Jackets. So I feel like on the one hand, there's that old trauma of Panarin and Bobrovsky that could push him to be all right, we got to just take whatever we can get for this guy. But man, on the other hand, he has looked pretty good with this team recently. It's going to be a shame to see him go, but I don't think that we'll see him with the Blue Jackets after the deadline.
I would agree with you 100%. And you hit on some of the points, right? So where has this been the whole time? This is a whole different conversation. Had Domi come in from the door when the Anderson trade happened and played like this and had an impact the whole time, then we're talking about how long do we get him and, for how much. I shouldn't say how long we get them, how long they get them. But the fact that he's been this inconsistent, and the fact that it's just now playing some of his best hockey, I think he'd be due a raise, and he's already getting 5.3 cap hit. Do they want to pay $6 million or more potentially for somebody who could be inconsistent again? And then if you think about where the Blue Jackets are going with their plan, they're in a reset, given Domi's age, just not sure that the fit is there. And I think that on top of that, he's their biggest trade chip. So you're going to get a pretty decent return out of it. So it's like, do you take the return and build toward the future? Or do you take a chance on somebody that could fall into a lull again? Like if we knew that they were getting that player, the one that we've seen the last couple weeks, absolutely, they would possibly consider a new contract. But right now, I just don't see it. I think there's enough interest in him that there's enough contenders that could help with their depth. I just don't see how we could stay past this deadline.
I think there's shades of that too with Patrick Laine and his extension is, we've seen both sides of that coin.
Yep.
And it'll be interesting with him too, but he does have the restricted free agency angle still. But
that's true. So
yeah.
I'm going to go this next one because it references Domi as well, but it's an interesting conversation to have. So this is Mark Carell, a very loyal on Twitter and listener here. So Mark, we thank you for actively participating very much. Says, I don't want this to happen, but I think Domi and a third, so adding a pick and giving that to the Boston Bruins for Jake DeBrusk. So I'll read the rest of this. Though I really would prefer to re-sign Domi. So another one similar to Justin who wants him back. Might even take Kukin to make the deal, but who knows? Well, Jake DeBrusk recently asked for a trade out of the Boston Bruins, and he's still playing there, still doing relatively well for himself, but there's a standing trade offer there. Could we see the potential that the Blue Jackets go down the road of a hockey trade, Nick?
Honestly, I've seen this proposal before similarly. And the thing that comes to my mind is like, it's such a lateral move. They're two, I would say they have equal maybe impact. Like, if you just from a score sheet standpoint alone, DeBrusk he's scored less than Domi this year. He's more of a goal scorer, it looks like. I haven't watched him too closely, if I can be honest with you, but it just seems like a lateral move. And I don't know if that's a move that the Jackets are really looking to make at this point in their tooling. I don't think that we're looking at a hockey trade for Domi.
For Domi, I think I agree with that, although I would make the argument that I think the Blue Jackets would be interested in DeBrusk if there was a path. And I think that he could be part of the future. He does enough good things. He's recently played on the Bruins top line. Been really good. But yeah, I don't think, because Domi's a UFA, I believe DeBrusk is still an RFA. So there would have to be more given to the Bruins to make something like that happen. I think the point we want to take away here is that what's Jarmo Kekalainen's motto when it comes to this sort of stuff? If it makes us better now and in the future, we'll explore it. So if there's a path to DeBrusk, they'll absolutely explore it. Whether they actually do, it's a whole nother matter. But hockey trades are certainly within the realm of possibility, because I think that a lot of teams around the league have to do hockey trades, money in, money out, because of the cap. They have to be more creative. We saw what happened in the rental market last year. The Toronto Maple Leafs got 11 games of Nick Foligno for a first-round pick, and I think that might kind of freak a lot of teams out. Seeing how little of a return that they actually got on that. So I think the possibility is there. It's just now, will Boston trade DeBrusk upcoming here? Really that's anybody's guess, but it's at least in the realm of possibility, in my opinion.
I think it's kind of similar to the Chychrun scenario in terms of this is a guy who's available. So I'm sure that you're right. Kekalainen has probably checked in on it.
Well, let's go to Chychrun, because the next person is Seiler. Remember our guest from a couple weeks ago. Welcome, Seiler. Appreciate you joining our show and doing this. She says, to the Blue Jackets, Jacob Chychrun. To the Coyotes, a 2022 first rounder that the Blue Jackets own pick, not the Blackhawks one, Liam Foudy and Emil Bemstrom. Your initial thoughts?
I don't think that's enough for Chychrun.
Definitely not. I do 100% agree with that. Nor do I think the Blue Jackets are interested in giving up a first round pick.
No. Yeah, I don't think that's the move.
But let's talk Chychrun for a minute. I do think it makes sense why the Blue Jackets would want Jacob Chychrun. What do the Blue Jackets not really have a lot of right now? That would be a physical presence, especially on their blue line. You know, Boquist, Bean, and others, smaller, more puck-moving defensemen. Chychrun's a physical guy. He can play both ends of the rink. He's got 3 years left on his deal at a very cap-friendly rate. So it certainly would take a king's ransom to convince the Coyotes to get off of Chychrun. But I know the Blue Jackets have at least explored this option. It's just given where they're at in the reset and given where they hope to go, and I think there's other moves that could be available. I just don't see them having to meet the price of what the Coyotes are looking for Jacob Chychrun at this point.
Yeah, I look up and down the roster, and it's like, what pieces would you be willing to really give up? Because you would assume that they would want at least one roster player back, who could make an impact. So that'd be tough to make ends meet.
For sure. So let's go back to Domi for a minute, because that's what the next one is here. Another someone from Finland, Samuli. We really appreciate you jumping on. He's been active on Twitter as of late, so we always appreciate the good hockey talk here. They say, Matt, and then now he said this before the Tyson Jost deal that went to Minnesota. Said Domi to Colorado for Jost and a fifth. Well, we can't do that now. And then he says, okay, Jost already got traded. Maybe they go to the Leafs for a first. Now, I think the question we want to consider here is, what is Max Domi's value on the trade market? And he says a first rounder. I'm not convinced that Domi is the type of player that would bring back a first round pick. Do you agree?
I would say that from a Blue Jackets perspective, he is the closest thing that could get them a first at the deadline.
I agree with that.
I'm not 100% sure, because we have mentioned that inconsistency. Maybe his little hot streak over the last few games turned some heads, and it takes that. But I don't know. I feel like maybe if they were trying to get a deal done, maybe this would have been done. So maybe there's not as big of a bidding war out there on him right now.
Well, I think there's a domino effect. I think other guys are in play where once teams figure out where that happens, then they kind of look at Domi and say, okay, well, what would it take to get somebody like that? Now, important to note, but with the Ottawa game, we're recording right before it here, Domi's playing. So it's not to the point where they're scratching him yet. Like Mark Giordano has been scratched in Seattle. I think there's a couple other guys out in the league that are to the point where they're doing asset protection. So hasn't reached that point yet. So it doesn't mean there's anything imminent at the moment, but it could be really, really maybe the Washington game. They play St. Louis on Saturday. Does it get to a point where he plays in those games? Oh, we'll see. That could be an indication of how close things are, or it could even just go down to Monday to see, which team might be able to snag him, because he's a former 70-point scorer. He'll have value. I just don't think that it would be for first. I think he's been too inconsistent. But if he has a nice showing these last couple games that he's able to play, maybe Kekalainen can pull some magic off and find a way to get some good value. I mean, I think a second is reasonable. A second or a third would be more reasonable when it comes to a pick. Or maybe there's a good prospect that comes out of it. A couple ways that can go, but just not convinced that it's a first round pick for Domi, even though the Blue Jackets would prefer that.
I would say the only way that has a chance of happening is if a third team is brought in to mitigate that cap hit.
Well,
because for Domi's number,
the Blue Jackets could eat that whole thing, though. That's a good point.
That's true. That's true.
Weaponizing. Yeah. They could elect to keep most of that because they have over $10 million in space, and then deadline space is well over that because of how late they are in the season. So I think if they might be able to get a little bit better prospect. Maybe they can get a little bit of a better pick if they choose to weaponize. And I think this might be the season for them to do it, given how many teams are in perceived cap hell. I think that's something we absolutely should be watching here at the trade deadline with the Blue Jackets. That could be one way to really make the most out of a trade.
And maybe they'll be willing to hop in on a different rental trade to absorb some money like San Jose did last year.
Yeah, they might get an extra pick or prospect that way too. Yeah, a lot of different directions they can go. So that's why they'll be interesting to watch no matter what. Now, Simoli brought up one other player that I think we need to talk about here, Nick, and that is Dean Kukan. And I know we've talked on the show about Dean, and I've always said, he's a UFA. I think that he ends up going. I know you said that you think he's gone by the deadline. Simoli says Dean Kukan to Carolina for a 4th round pick. Your thoughts?
I don't know. I think is that fair, or is that a little too much for Kukan?
I think that's a little too much. I think you could probably do maybe a 6th or a 7th and put a condition on it based on number of games. He sounds to me like more of an insurance policy than an everyday starter.
Yeah.
Now, if there's a team that comes up that is really, really desperate for a defenseman and needs someone to fill in, then maybe someone pays a little bit more. But I think, if you're looking at a 7th defenseman, an 8th defenseman, yeah, you're probably talking a late pick. If he makes like 25 or 50% of your games, maybe you go an extra round up or something like that. I think Kukan's very much in play. I think he's probably gone. I'm just not thinking a 4th round pick. That just a little too pricey in my opinion.
Yeah, especially in a market where they're giving away a lot of players. I don't know if you've seen all these future considerations trades. It's mainly for goalies, but still.
Yep. All right, so let's talk about a couple other things here. We have plenty of to go through here. So at CBJFan2 on Twitter said this one's interesting because now we're talking about a potential hockey deal. Liam Foudy, Jack Roslovic, a 2022 first, which is top 3 protected, for Connor Garland.
I like Garland.
Garland's a good player.
Garland. Yeah. He's a joy to watch out there. Not worth that much.
Yeah, I'm not sure they would do that either. I mean, a couple of things to talk about. The 1st round pick, again, I don't think they'd want to go down that road unless they're getting a significant upgrade in a trade. The questions that we need to consider with this are, what's Liam Foudy now? And what is Jack Roslovic now? Because Roslovic's been brought up in the past in certain trade rumors before, where it's maybe been a little bit of a question about effort or what his upside might be here. Are the Blue Jackets prepared, or is there a scenario where they would be ready to either deal Foudy or Roslovic at this point?
I don't think they're certain enough.
I agree with that. I think there needs to be time.
Yeah.
There needs to be, because first off, Liam Foudy's injured. He's been injured for the last several weeks in Cleveland. He hasn't even played. It's part of the reason why he hasn't been up to Columbus with some of these recalls. So let him get healed first. Because there's a good chance next year he could have himself a role if he really kills it during the summer. Players come and go. He's got that speed element. There's a certain, they're waiting for him. Roslovic, though, is the interesting one because, can he be a center? I mean, with Boone Jenner out, he's been elevated to the top line, and there's times where he's looked okay, despite some of his shortcomings, and he's still an RFA. I just don't know if they're prepared to give up on him. I think that they need to give him a little bit of time, because learning that position, it takes so much time to be able to learn all the ins and outs of being a center, being a defensive center. So I don't think I think they're both going to be here past the deadline. But if the right hockey deal were to come along where it's a clear upgrade, then maybe you put them in the conversation. I just don't think it's right here, right now.
Yeah, I agree.
So Lucas Main, I know was a writer here with the Hockey Writers at one point in time, brings up an interesting name. And this is something that I think is very realistic. This is actually one of the more reasoned trade proposals that I have seen to this point. and that is JF Berube to the Kings for a 7th round pick.
I love it.
That is a sweet spot sort of thing, because Berube used to be in the Kings organization. They've got Peterson, they've got Quick. You need to have depth, in case something were to happen. Berube's been in a couple games, had a nice little spell with the Blue Jackets here to cover for some injuries, and that it would just take a late round pick for something like that. Tarasov would be ready for training camp. He's recovering from the injury now. That makes perfect sense, right?
It does, but it also, like I've mentioned before, they're giving away like third string goalies for nothing. Like we saw Stalack move for future considerations. Carter Hutton for future considerations. I would say that Berube is probably in that same category. So if they can get a 7th round pick or something in return for him, I'd say that's probably that's a win.
Yep.
But the market might be set a little lower than that. But that is definitely reasonable. That's probably, in my opinion, the closest we've had, like you said.
So far. Yeah, that's really good, Lucas. So thank you for that. Before we go on here, again, talked about at the beginning of the show, make sure that you sign up for the morning skate. You got great stories out there delivered to your inbox every day. I know we harp on it, but I promise you it is worth your time. Excuse me, really good stuff out there. So make sure that you go to the website or to morningskate.io. All it takes is an email, and that's it. You'll get some really good stuff. So make sure that you do that.
Just do it.
Just do it. Just like Nick said.
It's not hard.
So we got to talk about the other big name now that's going to come up here with the Blue Jackets in the trade deadline, and that is Jonas Korpisalo. I'll be honest, I'm surprised he didn't start in Ottawa. But it's a clear indication Elvis is the number one. They're still trying to catch up. They need these wins with the Capitals winning all of a sudden and the Bruins on a hot streak. Elvis is your guy, or maybe to the point where they want to protect Korpisalo and not have him injured, because one injury away from him not being tradable. So, but we have a couple of fan proposals here that we can go over. So Patrick N says Korpisalo to Vegas for a 2nd, but due to the Blue Jackets retaining all of the salary as well as possibly taking on a contract. We're going to come back to that because there's a couple things we want to go over with that, but there's a couple other Corpy proposals that I want to call out here. Ann Kilch says Corpy to the Capitals straight up for a 4th round pick. Korpisalo to Toronto for a 4th that could become a 3rd if he plays 50% of the games. That's from Barrick Nichols. And let me see if there are any other Korpisalos that are out here that we can include in this. Domi and Korpisalo to Edmonton for a late 1st. I don't like that return, but kind of combining the two assets to try to make a trade is the point there. Let me look at one other place here. Let's see if some other Korpisalos. Okay, so that's it on the Korpisalo front.
We're tapped out.
Tapped out on the Korpisalo front. But let's go back to the Vegas one. That one's interesting to me. Korpisalo to Vegas for a 2nd, because they're retaining all of the salary, because we know that the Golden Knights have so many players on injured reserve right now and long-term injury, and they're right up against the cap, and then they're taking on a contract. How realistic is it? Because now we're talking about the Golden Knights. They're struggling like crazy. They can't stop. They can't make a save right now. Logan Thompson's been in their last 2 games. Laurent Brossoit is their starter with Lehner injured. How desperately do the Golden Knights need a goaltender? If Lehner's out for the rest of the year, we don't know that, but there's some speculation out there that could be the case. Missing the playoffs is not an option for them. They need a backstop. Is Korpisalo an upgrade to Brossoit?
Maybe. See, that's the thing. We've seen Korpisalo, like, it sounds like such a cop-out, but like Korpisalo, he gets hot and then he's not.
Mhm.
you know?
Yeah.
So if he's hot, yeah, he's perceivably an upgrade. But if he's been playing like he has a lot of the time this year,
Mhm.
I don't know. I think he's kind of played himself out of the return of a second round pick too. I think we're looking at like a 4th would be great to get for him at this point.
Now the salary part though, if they retain it all or a lot of that salary, maybe you can start getting into that range. They definitely need to do something. It's just a matter of, what is it at this point?
Well, and who else is out there in the market, right?
It's exactly right. I don't think Holtby's out in the market anymore because Qdobin's injured in Dallas, so take another name off the board. Yeah, they very well could have this conversation. It's something we're going to be watching, especially anytime that there's a possibility to weaponize the cap. I could at least see the logic behind this proposal. Not that it'll happen, but the logic's there.
It would be interesting because every time he's played really well, he's played really well behind a tight defense.
Yes.
And Vegas does have an upgrade in defense over the Blue Jackets. So 100%. That might be worth taking a swing at.
And listen, the Vegas Golden Knights are one of the best teams in the league when they are entirely healthy. They just have not been that. Mark Stone, long-term injured reserve. I can go down the list. Riley Smith's been injured. Nolan Patrick just got back from injury, and there are several others who could be here for a while going over their entire MASH unit. But when they're all healthy, it's a dangerous team. You put a goalie like Korpisalo, if he was back to kind of his form, you could see where a deal like that would make some sense. So now let's look at the one you mentioned, the 4th rounder. How about the Capitals? Where are they at with their goaltender? That's an interesting situation. Samsonov and
Vanacek? Yeah, yes. Vanacek.
For a 4th. Would in division trade? Man, I don't know.
I don't know if they're going to spend too much to get a guy who might not even play for them. Because, that's like a real tandem in Washington.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know, it's kind of like when the Jackets brought in Keith Kincaid in 2019 or whatever, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
They had a tandem and Kincaid didn't end up playing for them. So was it really worth going out and getting that asset when either one of those guys for the Capitals could take the reins. So they're not starving for help if one of those guys gets hurt.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And then the other Korpisalo thing was to Toronto for a 4th that becomes a 3rd if he plays in half the games. Where are the Leafs at with their goaltending? We saw that Shelgren came in and shut out the Stars. He's going to get another start against the Hurricane. I think we'll learn a lot more about him playing the Hurricanes on Thursday night. But do they have to address goaltending in your mind, Nick?
I don't know if in goaltending is a different question, but I don't know if Kyle Dubas is going to want to deal with Kekalainen after he's just has not had great luck with trading for guys from Kekalainen. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure Korpisalo is the guy they're after. If they're going to make a move in goal, I think it's going to be for an established guy, because all of their goalies that they've gone with in the past have been, kind of like Korpisalo kind of guys who've jumped on a good opportunity and shown well in that. But
yep. So we're going to start to wrap this up here. We got a couple more. I'm going to go back to Chychrun for a minute because I just saw this one, and this is interesting from a hockey trade standpoint. It says this is from Noah. Chychrun to the Blue Jackets, or they have the term left. Arizona gets the Jackets first, a 3rd and 23, Corson Ceulemans and Liam Foudy. That's at least closer to what the Coyotes would possibly look for in a deal. But man, they love Ceulemans. I don't know if they want to give up their first, but at least from looking at it from the Coyotes lens, they might think about that.
Yeah, that would definitely turn ahead. But
maybe throw a condition on the first rounder. Maybe throw a condition. I don't know, but
Yeah, I don't think that's a move from the Blue Jackets. I think they're too excited about Coolemans.
I agree. Now that the fact that they were able to get Coleman's the way that they did to go along with Johnson and Sillinger, that's a coup. But again, they need a guy like Chikrin would be a huge addition to the blue line. Because now you can
there's no debate.
Yeah, because then you get Gavrikov, Chikrin, and Werenski on the same blue line to go along with the other young talent that you already have. And you get the cap friendly number for a couple of years after that too. Just, do they believe that Chikrin would rebound? And he's such a good player when he's in a good situation. Just being on this Arizona team has just really wrecked the perception of him.
Well, when I look at him, it's like, what's the main draw right now is kind of that cap number for those next few years, right?
Yep.
And are the Jackets really going to be contenders in that time where they would benefit from that cap hit?
If Elvis plays the way that he can, if the blue line is much more improved, and you have Laine, Voracek, Bjorkstrand, a healthy Jenner, Kent Johnson, Marchenko, why not? They have to vastly
a lot has to go right.
A lot has to go right, but I think Elvis has a better game in him. The defense has to be improved. They're like, if there's anything that they're going to address this offseason, I think they have to address the blue line. Like the shots on goal that they're allowing, the number of goals they're allowing, that's not Blue Jacket hockey. I mean, given where they're at, you kind of expect it to happen this year, but moving forward, you would think that that'd be a priority for them.
Okay, so you see that. Does that then affect some of their moves heading into this deadline? If maybe there's a defender who maybe we're not looking at, like a Bean, someone like that, could we see a sneaky defenseman trade that we weren't maybe expecting at the deadline?
Oh, I don't know about the deadline, but the off season, there's a possibility. I mean, if Bean and Boquist are sort of similar, Boquist is the higher offensive upside, but Bean is still a pretty good young player with some upside too. But they're missing a certain element back there. If you include one of them and some other pieces, I think you consider that trade, because from a Blue Jacket standpoint, they would love a two-way defenseman who can score goals, who can be physical, who can eat a ton of minutes. If you can get two of them like that, because Werenski eats a ton of minutes, if you can get a second guy like that, you instantly upgrade your defense. And that's something I think they would look into for sure.
Yeah, you definitely benefit from a championship contending team perspective, having, because if you have two guys playing like 30 minutes a night, one of them's out there all the time pretty much.
Yep. But if the price is too high, then they'll just move on. They're under no pressure to have to take that deal. So
yeah.
So let's talk about one more player before wrapping this show up here. And I don't personally think he's going anywhere, even though there's been some at least some thought that it could happen because of the Toffoli trade, but that's Gus Nyquist. So let's talk Gus Nyquist for a minute. Matthew says Nyquist salary retained to the Ducks for Max Comtois and a second round pick. Nyquist has 1 year left after this year. And we have another one too. I'll give you the little perspective. Nyquist retained to the Kings for Kupari and a 2022 second rounder, with the theory that the Kings are ready to win. Like they're going to probably make the playoffs this year and are ready to go on a run. Do you add a veteran player like Nyquist, but would you be willing to give up a center prospect and another pick? Are they ready for that?
I don't know. The Kings are trending up. They've had one of the best farm systems for the last few years.
Yep.
Not sure that they'd be willing to fill up a roster spot with Nyquist when they've already got some pretty good veteran
Dustin
forwards.
Brown, Kopitar, and go on and on. Yeah. Arvidsson. I mean, they certainly would be interested in a forward. I mean, if you're looking for a playoff run, you're looking for someone that can kill penalties, that can just do anything you ask of them. That would make sense. Just my question would be, are they ready for that step yet? And Anaheim, where are they going to go? They got a lot of decisions they have to make on their own. I mean, they've already gotten rid of Josh Manson. Hampus Lindholm and Ricard Raquel are a couple guys that could very easily go by the deadline. I'm just not sure that they're ready for that step, because if you're bringing in Nyquist, you're basically saying we think we have a chance this year, we think we have a chance next year, and we think that this player is going to help us get to that goal. I'm just not sure the Ducks are at that point yet.
Yeah, it seems like a buying move as opposed to selling, which they've started doing.
I could see a team like the Bruins or the Avalanche do something like that, though. If
Yeah,
they're willing to
there's
give up a
definitely a
first round.
market.
Yeah, there would be a market. If you look at the Toffoli trade, that would be a player that could generate a first round pick back, and then maybe some other pieces too. I just don't think it's going to happen. He's a veteran presence. He's a leader. He's really instrumental to that locker room. I mean, they'll listen. If someone just comes over the top and says, we're going to give you a lot of stuff, they'll absolutely listen. I don't think that's going to happen. I think that he stays past this deadline. We might be having this conversation next year when he's pending UFA, though.
Yeah, they really like him in Columbus.
They do.
And there's lots of reasons to see why.
Absolutely right. Well, this has been an awesome show. Nick, great job as always. Fans, thank you.
Hang on, Mark. Yep. Before you wrap up, I got to ask you one thing. It's real quick, yes or no. Do you think by the time this is released tomorrow, the Blue Jackets will have made a trade?
No, I think it's going to be closer to the deadline. You
think Kekalainen's going to be happy to see, he doesn't want to mess up our show, making us sound like idiots talking about Domi when they trade him to, I don't know, Winnipeg or something?
If he was out of the Ottawa game, I would say yeah. But I don't think it's imminent yet. So we'll see.
Yeah, I agree. But it would be funny.
It would. Oh gosh, he would do that just to spite us. I know, right? But fans, thank you so much for joining us. Enjoy everything that's going to happen. We'll be back next week. I think we're going to have a guest next week. I'll announce it if we know for sure. But we'll react to the trade deadline and so much more. So until next week, take care. Enjoy what's about to unfold, and thank you for joining us here at Union Junction.